Spoiler alert, if you are planning on seeing Disclosure Day in theaters or when it becomes available on streaming, you may want to skip this video because I am going to discuss the film's climactic reveals, which may ruin the experience for you. Now, as you know, I don't typically do movie reviews, but many of you asked me to watch this film and publish a review to give you my thoughts. So I decided to do just that. Truth be told, I wasn't initially interested in the film. In fact, I published a post on X the other day which read, "I'm not really interested in seeing Disclosure Day. I have CGI fatigue. Sorry, Mr. Spielberg, but the magic is gone." Now, having seen the film, I can assure you that I will not be retracting that post. So to begin with, let's discuss the main male protagonist of Disclosure Day, Dr. Daniel Kellner. Kellner is a young cybersecurity expert working for a military contractor who becomes a whistleblower. This character is clearly based on the real-life whistleblowers, Edward Snowden, and primarily David Grush. In fact, there is a hat tip to Grush in the film, which we will discuss momentarily. And because the premise of the film is apparently based on Grush's congressional testimony, we should remind ourselves of who he is and what he has officially revealed. This is, I think, the appropriate place to start, and you'll see why as we move forward. David Grush worked as a career intelligence officer in the United States Air Force and held senior positions at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the NGA, and the National Reconnaissance Office, the NRO. He was co-lead for the UAP analysis portfolio at the NGA and the agency's representative to the UAP task force. In this capacity, Grush had access to classified UFO-related material and interviewed more than 40 witnesses over the span of 4 years, including individuals with first-hand knowledge. So he wasn't just talking to people who had secondhand knowledge. It wasn't just anecdotal. David Grush interviewed people in an official capacity who have firsthand knowledge of the so-called legacy program, of the crash retrieval program. We're talking about UFOs here. In 2023, Grush testified under oath before Congress and made the following primary claims. Number one, the U.S. government has been running a clandestine, multi-decade UFO crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, the so-called legacy program, which he was not permitted to be read in on, by the way. He was blocked from gaining any access to the legacy program. Number two, the program was designed to circumvent congressional oversight and remain hidden from the public, and I would add inaccessible to not only members of Congress, but to the executive branch as well. Number three, the government and its defense contracting partners are in possession of alien spacecraft and non-human biologics. This was a term introduced by Grush at the hearing. Number four, he claimed the U.S. government became aware of non-human intelligence as early as the 1930s and has been engaging with it ever since. And then number five, people have been threatened, and he insinuated even killed, by the government and private contractors in an effort to conceal, quote-unquote, extraterrestrial technology. Now, these 5 points basically sum up the premise of Disclosure Day. And we will summarize, I'll give you a synopsis of the film for those of you who haven't seen it before we continue. The synopsis can be described as follows. The story revolves around Daniel Kellner, aka David Grush, a cybersecurity analyst turned whistleblower who steals video evidence of extraterrestrial crash retrievals and other alien-related material from a defense contractor called Wardex. As he tries to expose the truth to the world, He is hunted by Wardex's CEO, Noah Scanlon, who believes humanity cannot handle the revelation. Running parallel to Daniel's story is Margaret Fairchild, played by Emily Blunt, a Kansas City meteorologist who develops strange mental abilities, including mind reading and speaking in an unknown language on air. Her condition draws Wardex's attention and ultimately links her fate to Daniel's disclosure mission. The film is less about an alien invasion than about truth, secrecy, institutional control, fear, empathy, and whether mankind can bear the knowledge that we are not alone. The official tagline frames the question directly, quote, "If you found out we're not alone, would that frighten you?" In short, the film is a UFO whistleblower chase thriller that combines the urgency of a government contractor cover-up with deeper themes of ET technology, alien abduction, and the psychological shock of disclosure. Now, there's been a lot of excitement about this film, surrounding this film, leading up to its release. And there are some statements that were made by Spielberg in regard to how the Christian community might react. We are going to address some of those issues at the end of this review, at the end of this analysis of the film. So stick around if you're interested in that. In some recent interviews, Spielberg has suggested that sudden disclosure could produce ontological shock and social dislocation. In other words, if the government were to announce that it has been concealing the existence of extraterrestrials since 1947, in Spielberg's words, that revelation would, quote, mess up a lot of people, end quote. Disclosure Day is being billed as a classic Spielberg summer blockbuster in the vein of Indiana Jones and E.T., which invites the inevitable question, does it measure up to his previous blockbusters? And in short, the answer is no. This is not Jurassic Park, indeed far from it. The film is very dialogue heavy and even, I would say, preachy at times. The narrative often feels forced and the pacing rushed, largely because the film is, at its core, a chase thriller. I should acknowledge my own bias here. I am not especially fond of chase thrillers, particularly car chase thrillers. And this film devotes a significant amount of screen time to them. The car chase scenes just felt like tedious filler to me, and overall made the experience of watching this film very boring. I will say, however, that Emily Blunt does deliver an impressive performance as the primary female protagonist. She was really the only reason I was able to tolerate the chase thriller tedium. She was quite comical, actually, in some scenes in this film. I thought she did a good job, a solid performance by Emily Blunt, so my hat's off to her. And I would certainly not characterize this as a bad film, because in true Spielberg fashion, it does have an epic conclusion, albeit abrupt. The last 30 to 40 minutes of the film are, in my opinion, impressively composed and definitely worth watching. It's an info dump at the end of the film, and if you're a UFO buff, you'll appreciate it, because Spielberg really shows his knowledge of ufology here. There are fictional scenes of historical crash retrievals, including, obviously, Roswell, but also less-known events such as the Kecksburg incident, which was a famous event that took place on December 9th, 1965, when hundreds of witnesses across the eastern United States saw a glowing fireball streak through the sky and crash into the woods in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. The military swiftly cordoned off the area and reportedly hauled away a large acorn-shaped object on a flatbed truck. And you'll see the Kecksburg incident featured at the end as they're moving through different historical crash retrieval incidents. And they even show the gray alien bodies. It was pretty compelling. I thought it was a very interesting info dump based on real incidents at the end of the film. So even if you're not interested in the rest of this film, when it comes out on streaming, if you're a UFO buff, if you're interested in the topic, I think you're going to like the last 30 to 40 minutes. Now, they roll through these and other incidents in a dramatic, impromptu disclosure news broadcast scene, even showing dead and dying gray aliens associated with the crashes. And all of this info dump culminates with them literally rolling out a living geriatric gray alien in a wheelchair in front of the cameras during this fictionalized news broadcast. This is the crescendo moment of the film. And I must say, I was shocked by this scene, but not because it was emotionally gripping or visually stunning. In fact, quite the opposite. I was shocked by how bad the CGI was here. I mean, I've seen better looking aliens in video games. Unfortunately, it was laughable and completely eviscerated the climactic momentum that the film had managed to achieve at this point. It was, at least for me, utterly anticlimactic. And I don't know if they spent all their money on those tedious car chases and explosions. There's a scene with on train tracks, which is typical Spielberg high budget explosions and that sort of thing. But the CGI alien at the end is subpar, which is surprising, given that this is a Spielberg summer blockbuster. I mean, the aliens in this movie pale in comparison to movies that were produced many years ago. I mean, Independence Day was made 30 years ago, and the aliens in that movie were much more compelling than the CGI slop in Disclosure Day. Of course, they were using animatronics back then, and I'm an old school guy. Man, I prefer animatronics any day over CGI. There's just something about the animatronics, even when they were less than convincing, that was just so much better than CGI. I mean, think about some of those movies back in the 90s and early 2000s that maybe used a little bit of CGI when it was first coming out, but really relied on animatronics. There was just something more tangible, more real about those films. But the CGI isn't the thing that bothered me the most about Disclosure Day. It was the way the film portrayed alien abduction. We find out near the end of the film, although this was obvious for anyone familiar with the topic at the beginning of the film, that the protagonists, Daniel Kellner and Margaret Fairchild, are quote-unquote experiencers, meaning they are abductees. And if you know anything about me and my work, I do not like the term experiencers. I think the term abductee is much more apropos and accurate. It turns out that these characters were given special abilities during a particular abduction episode when they were kids. They met each other, actually, on the alien vessel during this experience, which you find out later in the film. And the film presents alien abduction as a gentle, loving, and overall positive experience. Now, the kids are alarmed and frightened during the experience in the film, but it is revealed that the purpose of the abduction is essentially to save humanity by using these children as the agents or passengers, as they're called in the film, for eventual disclosure. In other words, the aliens gave these children extraordinary abilities that would ultimately position them to be the vectors for disclosure when they were adults. To this end, Daniel Kellner ends up working for the defense contractor that possesses alien technology and the archival footage of crash retrievals and contact with the beings, which Daniel steals from with the intention of disclosing to the public. And Margaret Fairchild works at a news station as a popular weather woman, meteorologist. So she's in a position to broadcast the stolen information. So this is the interplay between these two characters. You have the one, the David Grush character, who is in possession of classified material that proves the existence of extraterrestrials and footage related to the crash retrievals and so forth. And then you have Margaret Fairchild, who is in a position to broadcast that information to the world. And the disclosure ends up coming at a time when the world is on the brink of World War III, apparently. Although this detail is a bit vague in the film, and it's poorly presented. It's a poorly executed idea. I mean, they tell you that the world is on the brink of a nuclear holocaust, and it's sort of sprinkled through the film, but surprisingly, it's not done very well. So you really don't feel the urgency. You don't really feel like this disclosure moment that comes at the end of the film really interrupts the impending world war. It's not well executed. So basically, a dramatic news broadcast disclosure of the alien presence and the government cover-up saves the world. I mean, that's the idea at the end of the film. In the final scene of the film, the geriatric CGI alien whispers a message to Daniel, who can understand their language, which he then relays to Margaret, who, while sitting at the news desk in front of the cameras with the whole world watching, begins to repeat the message that the alien is conveying to the world with the word, "Listen," at which point the film abruptly ends. So, while the alien's message is never actually revealed, Spielberg clearly means to convey to the movie-going audience that the benevolent gray aliens are here to save us from ourselves. Like that's the idea. That's the messaging. And this is, of course, ironic because the real agenda of the gray aliens is not to save humanity, but to enslave humanity and acquisition the earth through the covert action of their human-alien hybrids. This is the true purpose of alien abduction. It's a breeding program for the progeneration of human-alien hybrids. And Spielberg should know better, because he's been intensely interested in the topic of alien abduction for a long time. And he even made a TV series about it back in 2002 called Taken, which incidentally may have been loosely based on the work of abduction researcher and abductee Carla Turner, who published a book with the same title previous to Spielberg's series. Now, it is rumored that Steven Spielberg has a collection of alien implants and other artifacts related to alien abduction. And he seems to have access, or at least to have had access, to a database of abductees, which he could only have obtained from the government. And I know this because the late Tom Horn told me a very interesting story about an encounter his sister had with some of Spielberg's people back in the early 2000s. Now, I don't remember all the details, but Tom's sister was either in the vicinity of or attending a promotional event for the movie Taken, and was approached by people associated with Spielberg. Now, these people somehow knew that Tom's sister was an abductee, a secret she had kept from everyone except for certain family members, including Tom. And she was utterly flabbergasted that Spielberg's people knew who she was. They knew her name. They knew she was an abductee, and if I remember correctly, they even knew some other intimate details about her life. And it was inexplicable. She had no idea how these people knew who she was. So I think Spielberg has had some level of access to classified information related to the abduction phenomenon. I don't think this would really be surprising to anyone. I think that, this is a form of conditioning that the intelligence community uses. They'll interface with certain directors and leak certain information to them, leak some classified information to them, or particular aspects of classified information, so that the public can be conditioned with particular messaging. I mean, that's not uncommon. I'm going to take a moment here at this juncture to tell you guys about my members community. I really believe that I have the best members community on the internet. If you want hundreds of hours of additional content from me, including live streams, book club studies, and private briefings, as well as access to my proprietary social media platform where you can directly interact with me and with a wonderful group of people who are just as hungry for the truth as you are, then I strongly suggest you join my community. There is simply nothing else like it. This is a place where we delve deep into a host of topics at a university level to learn and grow with one another in a troll-free environment. Come, join us. I promise you won't regret it. Go to thealberinoanalysis.com and become a member today. Let's get back to my analysis of Steven Spielberg's Disclosure Day. As previously mentioned, one of the things that really bothered me about this film is how preachy, how sermonizing some of the dialogue is. There's a particular scene between two characters, Daniel, the David Grush character, and Jane, his love interest, who also happens to be a devout Catholic, where Daniel shows Jane some of the videos he's stolen from the defense contractor and gives her a quick overview of basically the legacy program. It's during this scene that Spielberg reveals that the Daniel character is indeed based on Grush, because what he tells Jane is basically a summary of Grush's testimony before Congress, which we reviewed previously. When referring to alien bodies recovered at crash retrieval sites, he even uses the term biologics, which was practically non-existent in the UFO vernacular until Grush coined the term during the congressional hearing. I don't know if he actually coined the term, but it's the first time I had heard the term biologics used in relation to these crash retrievals. And I don't know if that's a word that's used on the inside, if that's a word that's kicked around at the Pentagon, or it's used in official capacity somewhere within the legacy program. But it's the first time I heard the term. It's probably the first time that Steven Spielberg heard the term. So the intentional use of that word, biologics, that's a hat tip to David Grush. No doubt about it. Now, Jane's reaction to this information and to Daniel's plan to disclose it to the public is rather hysterical. She thinks the information will be too disruptive to society, and especially to Christians who would potentially lose their faith when they find out humans are not alone in the universe. And frankly, the dialogue here feels forced and corny. It's just so unrealistic, and it doesn't make any sense, her reaction. It's so forced. Later in the film, Jane, still struggling to reconcile the alien presence with her religious worldview, places a call to the Mother Superior of a convent of nuns introduced earlier in the story to get some theological grounding. And this is a very hokey scene. During the conversation, Jane, in desperation, declares, quote, "Genesis says that we're his supreme creation," end quote. To which the Mother Superior responds, quote, "Genesis says humans are God's supreme creation on earth," end quote. This scene made me want to pull my hair out. I mean, first of all, Genesis never says that we are God's supreme creation on earth or anywhere else in the universe. It does say that we are made in the image and likeness of God. It does not say that we are exclusively made in the image and likeness of God. That is a fallacy. In fact, the scriptures make it abundantly clear that mankind was created to be a little lower than the angels, than the heavenly beings. Psalm 8 declares, "What is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you care for him? Yet you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings, and crowned him with glory and honor." So the idea that we are God's supreme creation is ignorant and arrogant, and certainly not derived from the scriptures. And this betrays the intention behind the film. During the promotional marketing campaign before the film's release, Spielberg suggested that Disclosure Day would challenge people's fundamental beliefs, including the position of the church, the Catholic Church, and whether God is only God of this planet or also God over worlds, over other worlds rather, with intelligent life. Well, it's obvious that Spielberg and his screenwriter, David Cope, are woefully ignorant about the biblical paradigm, which already accounts for superior beings of extraterrestrial provenance, namely the sons of God, the angelic race. And the biblical narrative already declares that Jesus, the preeminent Son of God, is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Now, in my book, Birthright, I note that, and I'll quote this, quote, "When titles of regency are directly juxtaposed in the text, in this case, kings and lords, they often reflect two distinct realities, the terrestrial and the extraterrestrial, the human and the non-human. The terrestrial realm is the domain of the human race, governed by human kings, but other realms, more ancient than the earth, are governed by the lords or princes of the elder race. Extraterrestrial thrones, dominions, and principalities were appointed by the Son of God, according to the scriptures, the Prince of Princes, long before the creation of mankind," end quote. And then, in regard to Revelation 19, where Jesus is depicted triumphantly returning to the earth on a white horse with many crowns on his head and the name King of Kings and Lord of Lords written on his thigh, I write, quote, "Notice that the king's head is adorned with many diadems or crowns, which correspond to the title written on his thigh, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. These diadems and titles of regency imply a plurality of realms, terrestrial and extraterrestrial. The kingdom of heaven comprises many realms, and Jesus is King and Lord of all." So the point here is that the revelation that there are other alien species inhabiting the universe from other civilizations, from other planets, does not do violence to the biblical narrative whatsoever, because the Bible declares that regardless of what's out there, regardless of what kind of beings are inhabiting the universe, the Son of God is King and Lord over all. So again, there's no conflict here whatsoever with biblical theology, with good biblical theology. And there's a lot of people out there who have really bad biblical theology who are having a hard time accommodating the reality of the alien presence into a biblical paradigm. This is what I do in my book, Birthright. Okay, so if you haven't read Birthright, if you're interested in this topic, you want to understand how the existence of extraterrestrial life, the potential existence of extraterrestrial life elsewhere in the universe could be accommodating to the biblical paradigm, then get a copy of my book, Birthright, The Coming Post-Human Apocalypse and the Usurpation of Adam's Dominion on Planet Earth, available in paperback and Kindle and in audio form on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon. Just type my name in and you will see that book. And by the way, my book has been a bestseller for a long time, and it is being read by a lot of Christians in government who are who are attempting to comprehend the alien presence within a biblical paradigm, because frankly, just the sophomoric declaration that aliens are demons isn't cutting it. And so we need as Christians, we need a much more sophisticated reply that conforms to what we know to be true about this phenomenon. So, as I said, the existence of other worlds populated by non-human entities poses no threat whatsoever to the biblical paradigm. This is a false dilemma that is being parroted by people who are not biblically literate. It's a false dilemma that's being presented in the film. And then there's this clumsy attempt to answer it with Mother Superior. The Bible says that mankind is the supreme of God's supreme creation on earth. Again, that's an inaccurate statement, and it's ridiculous. So all of the social media hype, as you guys are well aware, surrounding the release of this film and whether it would cause Christians to question their faith in God was hyperbolic drivel. And a lot of people got caught up in that, but it ended up amounting to absolutely nothing, because this film, first of all, it's not cinematically powerful enough to cause anyone who's grounded in their faith to question the tenets of their fundamental tenets of their belief, right? Their belief system. So the film just doesn't deliver. Even if that were the intention of the film, it's just not. It's boring. You're watching car chases for half the film, and then it's just not very. It's not very compelling. And then when you get to the end of the film, as I said before, the CGI just totally ruins whatever momentum the film is building up until that point. So nobody's going to be losing their faith from watching Disclosure Day, okay? Except maybe people who really, whose faith is already very feeble and delicate and not deeply rooted. I'll conclude with a quote from the Babylon Bee, which I think aptly describes the reality of the situation. They write, quote, "Disclosure Day causes audiences to question their faith in Steven Spielberg." And I mean, that's really it in my mind. It's if you're going to question anything, you're going to question whether or not Steven Spielberg is capable of directing, producing the kinds of summer blockbusters that he is famous for, and that made him, I think, indisputably the greatest director and filmmaker of all time. So this isn't a knock on Steven Spielberg. I, like everyone else my age growing up in the 80s and 90s, I was enthralled by the Spielberg summer blockbusters. And I lament the fact that this film isn't in that category, doesn't measure up to his previous titles. So I wish it did. But unfortunately, I was bored out of my brains watching this thing in theater. So I don't want to stop you guys from going and seeing it. I don't want to hinder your interest in the film. Like I said, it's definitely worth the last 30 to 40 minutes. If you're a UFO buff, you'll appreciate it. And I think it's pretty compelling at the end, except for the bad CGI. So, okay, guys, that's it. That's my review and analysis of Disclosure Day by Steven Spielberg. I hope you enjoyed this. Until next time.